What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Lombardi Time Brews, where I'm your host, John Delray. Today, diving into Packers versus Chiefs, the Week 13 Sunday Night Football matchup. So it is a long and extensive game preview that I'm going to be doing with, a longer injury report at the very least than normal. So let's dive straight into it. For the Green Bay Packers, out is running back Aaron Jones. This, of course, is expected. Matt LaFleur has been talking all week about how it is going to be a stretch or Aaron Jones is far away from being evaluated. Yeah, he's out. Doubtful would be cornerback Eric Stokes, not yet ready to return from his hamstring injury. And then questionable, here you have a lengthy list of questionable players: Jair Alexander, Devondre Campbell, Josiah DeGuara, Rudy Ford, Jaden Reed, Robert Rochelle, Darnell Savage, and Dontavian Wicks. Now, a few notes about a couple of these guys. One, Jair Alexander, we've been fooled before, Jair. So he's done this pattern now a couple times of getting in a couple limited practices and then ultimately not playing. It does sound more positive this time around, but hey, we've been down that road before, so yeah, he's just hoping he plays. In addition to that, Josiah DeGuara, he started practicing again, so he may be coming back. Jaden Reed, after 2 did not practices earlier in the week, he at least got in limited work on Friday, should put him on a trajectory to play, and that aligns with Matt LaFleur's comments. And then lastly, Darnell Savage, who received a questionable tag, but has been practicing fully, but he's also not yet on the roster. So if he is going to play in this game, it is going to take a maneuver from the Green Bay Packers. Looking at the Kansas City Chiefs side of things, questionable would be Jerick McKinnon, their backup running back. Out would be Nick Bolton, their inside linebacker, with a wrist injury, and he's been out for a little bit already. So this isn't a massive change to the Chiefs defense, but he is one of their better defenders, and it still is a noteworthy absence. Other than that, in terms of IR players, guys that have been there for a while, the only real notable name from the Chiefs would be McCole Hardman, of course, formerly of the Chiefs and then the Jets and then back to the Chiefs. Either way, he's on IR. He's not playing in this game. And what that does really is it leaves the current Chiefs depth chart at wide receiver as the following: Rashee Rice, Sky Moore, Justin Watson, MVS, Kadarius Toney, and Richie James. It's a not exactly a stellar group of wide receivers for the Chiefs, and we're going to be talking about that in just a little bit. Back on the Packers side of things, since we're looking more matchup based now, I do think many of the questionable tags for the Packers are actually we've seen this a lot this year from the Packers, a lot of banged up style injuries. I think the vast majority of these guys are going to be playing. I don't think this is going to be like the Detroit game where there's so many absences. It is a shorter injury list than it was even back then. So ultimately, I think a lot of these guys are going to play. So let's talk Kansas City Chiefs. Now, they are 8-3. And how did they get to 8-3? Well, they've racked up wins against the Jaguars, Bears, Jets, Vikings, Broncos, Chargers, Dolphins, and Raiders, with losses against the Lions, Broncos, and Eagles. An interesting little tidbit about their schedule so far is they've been held to 23 points or less in 7 of their 11 games. A very un-Chiefs-like statistic from the last half decade, at least for the Chiefs. This is not your typical win by shootout Chief team. There are some differences, and we're going to be exploring them quite a bit from a statistical standpoint. Of course, coaching-wise, their head coach is Andy Reid. Offensive coordinator is former Bears head coach Matt Nagy. And defensive coordinator is Steve Spagnuolo, one of the more aggressive defensive coordinators in the league, another facet that Jordan Love is going to have to be looking out for. So how are this year's Chiefs different than last year's Chiefs? Well, just looking from a personnel standpoint, this is a team that lost Orlando Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Juwan Thornhill all in free agency, while adding Jawan Taylor, Donovan Smith, Drew Janquil, and Richie James. Donovan Smith and Taylor, they're 2 starting tackles on the offensive line, both of them new. In terms of draft contributors, this is not exactly a rookie class that's contributed a ton for the Chiefs thus far. One would be their first-round pick, Felix Anduke-Uzomah. I know a lot of people from the Packers side of things really liked him at draft time, the edge rusher. He's been doing some work for the Chiefs, although not yet a ton. And then number 2, their second-round pick would be Rashee Rice, who's very quickly becoming their number 1 wide receiver. In terms of where this team ranks, let's take a look at offense first. Passing per game, they're putting up 258.5 yards per game through the air. That's good for 7th in the NFL. In rushing yards per game, it's 106.5. That's 17th in the NFL. And in overall scoring, 23.3 points per game. That's 11th in the NFL. So it's very weird to be sitting here talking about how like the Chiefs offense just isn't what it once was. It's going through this weird stagnation in the middle of the season. And yet 7th, 17th, and 11th, that ain't half bad. But they are slightly misleading, especially the point ones, because there have been a few games where they put up 41 points or kind of these outlier games that have raised up that average a little bit. Like I said, the real key to know here with the Chiefs is that in 7 of their 11 games, they've been held to 23 points or less. So just taking a look at the offense, okay, like when you really dive into the numbers, it's pretty clear to see that there's some things they do really well and some things where they really struggled. It hasn't been as immaculate as other seasons. Thus far, Mahomes has thrown 9 interceptions on the year. He gets pressured on 35% of his dropbacks. And when he does get pressured, he likes to throw the ball deep, a top 5 average depth of target on pressured throws. By the way, if you're wondering, the number 1 quarterback in that category happens to be Green Bay Packers quarterback Jordan Love. So this whole get pressured and sling it down the field thing should look very familiar to Packers fans. Now, as for a very, very clear good and bad, the good is they're almost all tough to bring down in Kansas City. Chiefs skill players lead the NFL in yards after catch. That's led by Travis Kelce and Rashee Rice. Rice, the second-round rookie, has 356 yards after the catch, which averages out to 8.1 yards after the catch for every single catch. Travis Kelce has a number almost half of that at about 4.4, but nonetheless, because of how Kelce's having like 70 catches on the year, he really racks up a yak number as well. Then let's take a look at their running game. Well, Isaiah Pacheco, he's top 15 in yards after contact on carries. And then you look at quarterback Patrick Mahomes, who has an 8.6% pressure to sack ratio, best in the NFL. So what am I saying here? Their receivers and skill positions lead the NFL in yards after the catch. Their running back is top 15 in yards after contact. Oh, and by their way, the quarterback is brought down at the lowest rate in the league from pressures turning into sacks. They're tough to bring down. They do that so well in every single facet of the offense. But, and this is a very large but, when it comes to the Kansas City Chiefs, they're not great at throwing the ball deep anymore. On throws targeting 20 yards down the field or more, Mahomes has only 1 touchdown while having 6 interceptions. He's also completing only 28% of those attempts. And the thing is, it doesn't really matter because we've talked in the past about other quarterbacks who like they favor the left side or the numbers on the right side are great. The numbers on the left are terrible. Not the case for Mahomes. It's pretty equally bad across left, center, and right when targeting 20 or more yards down the field. Now, those numbers aren't terrible on their own. 28% completion isn't that horrible for throws that are that deep down the field. But keep in mind that last year, Mahomes, throughout the totality of last year, was completing 44% of the same throws and had no picks all year. Now he's at 28% and 6 picks. Something's wrong with the deep game in Kansas City, something that the Packers need to exploit. Now, looking at the defense, this actually is kind of the bread and butter of the Chiefs team. Passing yards per game, they're giving up 176.6 yards per game. That's 3rd best in the NFL. Rushing yards per game, they're giving up 113.4. That's 19th in the NFL. If in case you're wondering, the Green Bay Packers and their great run defense are about 22 yards behind that on a per game basis. And then in terms of scoring, 16.5 points per game given up by the Chiefs. That's 3rd best in the NFL. The Chiefs, unequivocally by almost every metric, have one of the best defenses in the NFL. And that's so counterintuitive because you're looking at this and you're going, it's Patrick Mahomes, it's Travis Kelce. They put up 40 points a game. No, not this year. This year, their defense is suffocating while their offense is doing just enough. Now, diving into the defense a little bit more, you're going to notice an overall theme. Their offense is full of experts at making people miss, getting yards after the catch, yards after contact. Well, the defense is really good at actually doing the contact and following through on tackles and making plays. Only 2 defensive starters have missed tackle rates over 20%. And one of them happens to be probably their best defensive player in Chris Jones. And plus, some of the really good tacklers are at spots that you don't necessarily expect, like the slot cornerback. Trent McDuffie, arguably the best slot corner in football this year, has a missed tackle rate of only 9.8%, while being the Chiefs' 3rd leading tackler. Speaking on him a little bit more, he's becoming a budding star in the secondary. According to Zach Cruz on Twitter of Packers Wire, McDuffie leads the NFL with 5 forced fumbles and is first among all cornerbacks with 13 pressures, 5th with 22 stops, plus the dude's got 2 sacks. He's becoming an all-around defensive playmaker out of that slot spot, just like when Joe Barry was brought in and we heard all about what the star position could be in Green Bay. And of course, that hasn't totally come into fruition really since like Charles Woodson, but that's besides the point. McDuffie seems to actually be doing it for Kansas City. But in their secondary, besides McDuffie, there is one guy who deserves special mention, and that's their number 1 corner, Snead. He leads the team with 2 interceptions, 5 pass breakups, and a QB rating of only 60.3 when targeted. Now, that's their coverage. I would be completely negligent if I also didn't talk about one more aspect of their defense, and that is the pressure that they can generate. See, and it's not just Chris Jones. He does lead the team with 9 sacks per PFF, but George Karlaftis, he's got 8. That's from one edge. Mark Dana, he's coming from the other edge. He's got 6. And even Drew Tranquil, their inside linebacker, he's got 4. So it's not just Chris Jones. It's not even just the edges. Sometimes they get interior pressure from an inside linebacker as well. It's pressure that can come from you from all different directions. And that's one of the things that Steve Spagnuolo, the defensive coordinator, does really, really well, is scheme pressure and send a lot of bodies, especially against young quarterbacks. If you happen to remember Jordan Love's first start against Kansas City, the Aaron Rodgers COVID game, the game where Jordan Love's girlfriend and mom were sitting way up in the nosebleeds and everything else. Yeah, it wasn't great. And Matt LaFleur's taking the blame and whatever. But the big thing is here, remember when Spags, the defensive coordinator for the Chiefs, basically said, that's a young quarterback. Send everyone. And then they did. And it worked really, really well against Green Bay. They can't allow that to occur again. So let's take a look at some other relevant stats for the Chiefs here. Turnover margin, they're actually at negative 0.5 turnovers per game. That's tied for 23rd in the NFL, and frankly, quite uncharacteristic for a Patrick Mahomes-led offense. In terms of sacks per game, they get 3.4 sacks per game. That's tied for 3rd in the NFL. The Packers get 2.4, an entire sack behind. Penalties per game, Kansas City gets 6.5 penalties per game called against them. That's 19th in the NFL, while Green Bay gets 7.2. That's 30th in the NFL. Plays per game, the Chiefs are just a little bit quicker. They get a few more plays off per game. The Chiefs are at 64.5 per game. That's 14th in the NFL, while Green Bay sits at 60.8, 24th in the NFL. And special teams. Anders Carlson, I've been talking for a few weeks now, buddy, you got to make your kicks because it's even killing us in the special teams grading at this point because the Kansas City Chiefs are first per PFF with a 90.8 special teams grade. The Green Bay Packers, 18th in the NFL with 73.1, and I do got to believe that a good portion of that is due to a rookie kicker who keeps on missing kicks after being so rock solid at the beginning of the year. I've talked about that a bunch already in shout-outs and get-outs. Buddy, do me proud. You got to make your kicks. All right, so how do the Green Bay Packers take on the Kansas City Chiefs? Really, the Chiefs, even though they're not the offensive behemoth that they've been for a long time, they're winning in a different way this year. And the thing is, even putting up a low points per game, they're still finding ways to win. They're adapting to a whole new style of team. And again, be negligent if I didn't mention that Rashee Rice is developing as a nice big play threat, and I wouldn't be shocked if over the course of the rest of the season, those big plays and then passing numbers deep for Mahomes actually start to get better. How do the Packers pull this off? How do the baby Packers get a win against one of the best teams in the NFL? Number one, if Mahomes gives them to you, you best not miss your chance. The Chiefs, as I mentioned, have a worse turnover ratio than the Packers. Chiefs at negative 0.5 per game, the Packers at a dead even 0. It needs to stay that way. The Packers cannot lose the turnover battle against the Kansas City Chiefs and expect to win this game. May seem obvious, but it is hugely important in this matchup. Number two, on the same token, the coverage on the back end needs to be better than it was against Detroit. The Packers got excellent pressure against Detroit. As I mentioned before in last week's video, like getting pressure on over 50% of Goff's dropbacks. It was really impressive, especially Rashawn Gary. And they really do need to do that again against Kansas City. Both Donovan Smith and Juwan Taylor are very beatable, giving up a combined 67 pressures on the year thus far. Rashawn Gary especially needs to feast. But at times, and keep in mind, going against Detroit, they basically had an all backup secondary in there. But at times, Jared Goff really did bail out the Packers. That pressure was coming, and Goff did not make the correct decision, didn't make the right read, didn't make a good throw, whatever. He bailed out busted coverages from the Packers on the back end more than we maybe would like to admit. And I just don't have the same faith that even if Rashawn Gary, even if the pressure gets after Patrick Mahomes, I know all the numbers, I know the stats. This is still Patrick Mahomes. I just don't have the same amount of faith that he's going to screw it up as often as Jared Goff did. Now, if Jerry Alexander is healthy, and if he's right, that'll help. If Rudy Ford is back, that'll help. So the Packers are getting some reinforcements, but they have to shore up those coverage lapses on the back end, or else, even in a down year, Patrick Mahomes could still get them. And keep in mind, too, like, they got Travis Kelce. That's enough. Number three, and I know I'm really teeing in on what they have to do against the Chiefs offense, but kind of the key to the game, really, overall. Number three, stop the offense where the ball goes. In other words, tackle. See, I went over how well the Chiefs operate in space, how effective they are at yards after the catch, yards after contact, et cetera, et cetera. They're very difficult to bring down. And they've got Travis Kelce. Pacheco is an incredibly hard runner back there in the backfield as well. With Kansas City's inability to generate down the field plays, and that plays right into Joe Barry's defense. Like, that's the number one thing that they don't do, right? Don't give up the big pass play. And Kansas City can't really do the big pass play. That's a very favorable matchup for Green Bay. But where Green Bay falters defensively sometimes is in death of 1,000 paper cuts or by giving up too much yak or whatever, which is where the Chiefs have still been finding success. If the defense can successfully limit those yards after contact, yards after catch, then they truly could stifle this Chiefs offense. Like the death by 1,000 paper cuts offense and timely defense is how the Chiefs have still been winning all of these low-scoring games. The Packers cannot fall into the trap that other teams have. Number four, an offensive-focused one. Protect. Protect, 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 protect. I went over earlier how Spags is one of the most aggressive, one of the best defensive coordinators out there, especially against young quarterbacks. And he's got the horses to really get after Love again. And why the defense for the Chiefs has been so strong this year is because they have an ability to generate pressure while being sure on the back end. And it truly puts quarterbacks in the position of having nowhere to go. You're going to run for your life away from George Karlaftis or Chris Jones. And then even if you manage to get away from them, you got to find somebody open. And then no one's open because of Snead, McDuffie, and company. So in order to stop, or in order to advance the ball, I should say, you have to stop one of the facets of the Chiefs defense. And of course, that's easier said than done. And this is a different test for Green Bay than what we've generally seen. They have done a pretty good job over the course of the last month, stopping TJ Watt, Khalil Mack, Aiden Hutchinson. Like, they've gone against their fair share of big-named, really good edge rushers. Plus Aaron Donald, who technically is interior for the Rams, but who they really like to kick out a lot. So for the Packers, they've done a pretty good job. But Chris Jones, he's different. See, I've reviewed with the Rams how, like Aaron Donald, they like to kick him out over tackle, even outside of the tackle sometimes. Chris Jones is more interior than that, often playing in the B gap or over the tackle. And I have a feeling that when the Packers are trotting out John Runyon Jr. and Josh Myers, the Chiefs are going to like that matchup rather than putting Chris Jones against Zach Tom. So I would expect them to attempt to exploit that, especially when John Runyon Jr. is in. This is a different test for the Packers offensive line than what they've had to deal with over the last month, where the pressure has much more so come just from the outside in. And if they're going to win this game, they have to pass that test. I just don't have a lot of faith that if the Chiefs are constantly able to get downhill and get this direct pressure over the middle of the Packers line, that the Packers are still going to be able to function fully as an offense like we've seen over the course of the last 3 weeks, which means the Packers better put up every blockade that they can in the middle and allow Jordan Love to operate. So, my final thoughts here. The Chiefs aren't having their best year, but they're still ultimately finding ways to win. Defense is suffocating. Offense doesn't have the big plays that it once did, but it's doing enough. Still generates plenty of yards. And I do really like this matchup for the Packers. Like I said, Chiefs can't throw deep. Well, Packers don't give up the deep ball. Like, there are some things that sync up very, very nicely for the Packers against the Chiefs. But the Chiefs, like the Steelers earlier on the Packers schedule, are a team that's already figured out how to win, how to gut out tough victories, and having to do it in multiple ways, not just the ways that the reputation insists that you do or what everyone thinks that you're going to do. Whereas the Packers are still learning. And of course, winning against Detroit was a huge step forward. Would it shock me if the Packers won this game? No, it wouldn't. But I think this is the last game on the schedule, really, that you look at and go, that should probably be a loss for Green Bay, just for where they are right now. They're still learning how to win. Kansas City knows how to win. But the thing is, I think those who are calling for a Packers win are probably going to be disappointed, in my mind. And I'm going to be thrilled if I'm dead wrong on that. But at the same time, anyone projecting the Chiefs to have this massive victory, a get-right game for the Chiefs, I think they're going to be disappointed too. Because I do think that this game will be close. And if the Packers can follow the keys to the game, they might just win it. Still, though, the experienced team, the team that knows how to win, they get the win. Let's go Chiefs 24, Packers 20. And a close game at Lambeau should be a very, very fun game to watch. Join us on Sunday night. Of course, we're doing a watch party here. Me and Claudia will be here the whole time. No Packer fan should ever have to watch a game alone if they don't want to. We are here for you. We've been having a great time doing these watch parties. So log on Sunday night. Let's all hang out together and root for a Packers upset against the Kansas City Chiefs. I do hope you have had a fantastic week. Hope you have a great weekend. I'll see you Sunday night. And as always, go Pack Go.